Thanks, Judy. And good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. All right, enjoyed the plenary? Awesome. So this is kind of an interesting way to start a presentation, right? With a nuclear bomb going off. And it is directly relevant to my talk. So the title is No More Bombs, sort of embracing co-management as a path for recreational fisheries and conservation in Christmas Island in the Republic of Kiribati. And I want to take us halfway around the world to Christmas Island, right here in the middle of the Pacific. Hawaii is up here. What do you notice about this image? Where are the continents? Nowhere, right? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's very remote. And if you look at that, it could be like awesome, wonderful destination. I want to go there, but also remote from another reason. Depending on the context, it was also a great place to test nuclear bombs. So back in 1957 in the UK, Operation Grapple, down at this part of it's the largest atoll in the world, were detonating hydrogen bombs. And it's upwind of this large, massive lagoon and some small communities of local residents. And this wasn't the only time that nuclear bombs were detonated there. Between the 1957 and 1962, so the US came to play, and they detonated a total of 33 atmospheric nuclear bombs, 31 megatons, and there were 50 local residents, civilians, that were exposed to the radiation with minimal protection. And there's an amazing and sad story in a publication called The Conversation that goes into the effects of the nuclear bomb testing on the villagers and also still on the environment. So kind of depressing when you think about it. Out of sight, out of mind, nuclear bombs exploding and impacting the local community and the environment. From a recreational fishing standpoint, it was really thought of as the time where it was discovered as a fly fishing destination by the military personnel that were stationed there, many more than the local residents. And they got to experience the inner lagoon. Ample populations of bonefish was the initial target. And it wasn't really until the late 1970s that the contemporary flats fishing destination, it was recognized as a place to go, predominantly for bonefish. Currently, there are about 5,000 anglers per year that travel to Christmas Island from the United States, Australia, and Japan. It's aseasonal because it's on the equator. When it's crappy winter in North America, the North Americans go to Christmas Island to go fishing. When it's winter in Australia, the Australians come up. And it's an amazing destination because it is aseasonal. The lodges are busy year-round. Primarily, there are 4 fishing lodges, 3 of them that are locally owned. Many in terms of large source of employment, guides, cooks, and it's very socialistic. There's many people from the communities that work at these lodges for thinking about a source of economic input for the community. It's very important. And it's, again, just the point of reference, though, thinking about where the nuclear bombs were dropped in context to the local community. So when it comes to the recreational fishery, though, as it continues to expand, giant trevally are now a very interesting target, as are triggerfish. It all falls under the management of the Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Resources, MFOR. This is Max. He's in charge. He has a staff of about 9 people. This is their office that has air conditioning in one room, lots of sand on the floors. Technology has a challenge there. This is their boat. It runs sometimes. They often don't have fuel to put in the boats to do patrols. So it's very difficult for them to do the work that they need to do to take care of not only just the recreational fishing, but they have a lot of other things to do. Patrols in the inner lagoon for illegal harvest of bonefish. Bonefish netting was banned because of pressure put on the local government because of the emerging recreational fishery. They are also in charge of monitoring the pet fish trade. So there's a lot of harvest of aquarium fish that are then exported from the country. They fly them to Hawaii and then distribute them elsewhere around the world. This is a foreign fishing vessel. This is a purse seiner from Spain, where they harvest yellowfin tuna and big-eye tuna. And at some point during my drone shot here, you couldn't see the 7 other vessels that were there. So selling fishing rights is a really big part, and the monitor. And Max and his crew has to monitor the fish that are being harvested. So it's just one part. So in terms of the Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Resources, the recreational fishery is just one slice of what they need to do with 9 people and limited resources. And so when thinking about what capacity building should look like for the Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Resources, with the increase of potentially of more tourism and recreational angling being promoted, I want us to bring us back to this idea of things that we need to confront and look at ourselves in the mirror when we talk about the capacity building that happens in this context. There are many different examples of aid programs that deposit vehicles and deposit boats and say, here from a friends of country X, and in 6 months or so, the vehicle is in a compound stacked up with the sign on the side because they don't have the maintenance, the money to repair it. They don't have and they don't have the capacity to repair it. So thinking about the longevity of that, it's not very good. External influence and ideas without the appreciation of limitations. I read a report where somebody wanted to come in and provide iPads to all the fisheries officers for doing their monitoring. And the challenge there is they don't have really good internet. They don't have really good cell service. And the iPads basically die really quickly because of the salt environment. And so it's really it's a mismatch between the capacity that they have and these ideas that come from foreign entities in terms of their monitoring and the capacity building that the MFOR needs. There's also suggestions that are made that create disconnects or reinforce disconnects between the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of the Line Island Developments and the Ministry of Fisheries, because sometimes those pillars of governance also don't communicate with one another. And sometimes the suggestions that come in from different entities complicate matters. And then broadly going back to this blind eye of the historical context of colonialism and the needs of the entire community, especially in a changing world with sea level rise. They're not that far above sea level. There's a lot of other things that they're facing from a community development standpoint beyond just trying to increase the number of recreational anglers. And so I want to bring us back to this context. So there is a big push now to try to increase the number of recreational anglers. It's hard to see right there, but there's a recreational angler and a guide. And they're fishing at the bottom part of the island where the nuclear bombs, if you turn around 180 degrees, this is where the nuclear bombs were detonated. And so the juxtaposition of the tourism and the benefits of the tourism with the history, it's often puzzles me in terms of the awareness that the visitors have about the history of this place. And this is that sense of the colonialistic aspect of how we think about recreational fishing in this context and the development of it. And so the question is, can co-management for recreational fisheries act as an effective plan for conservation and management, knowing that the MFOR has limited resources, knowing that there's all these ideas and ideals that are being thrusted upon them that might not work with the capacity that they have. And I really started to dig in and think a bit more about learning from this two-eyed seeing framework with dealing with indigenous knowledge and the strengths of Western knowledge and bringing these ideas together, running workshops and thinking about creating bridges between the MFOR and the fishing guides and understanding the limitations, understanding the challenges, and figuring out how we actually use a community-centered approach that is ethical and respectful of the local context, the culture, and the ideals. So I know it sounds like a bit of on a soapbox, but it's interesting to see how often we miss the connections that are essential within the community between the agencies that are responsible for the recreational fisheries and the practitioners and the people that are on the ground, the stakeholders. And so, moving forward is how do you ultimately think about the collaborative efforts between all the fishing lodges, the fishing guides, the different pillars of the government, and aligning priorities given the current capacities, the community, and as well as future-proofing. That during COVID, the recreational fishery shut down and they had to harvest bonefish from the lagoon, they had to harvest GTs from the lagoon because there was no way to import food. And some of these other things. So thinking about, as we move forward, what's logistically possible, feasible, financially achievable, and avoiding these idea bombs as we're going into these lower middle income and countries, thinking about small island developing states, and keep understanding the perspective of the things that we bring to this situation to ultimately help them in terms of the management of the resources and the idea of how we can work together between the guides and the fisheries officers. And so the idea here is thinking about the idea of as us as scientists and practitioners going in and thinking about observing and not just seeing what's going on, to listen and not just hear, to understand and not just acknowledge, but have a deeper understanding of the history, and also the idea more of proposing as opposed to imposing our ideals, especially when we're going into a situation like this. And this is just a case study, an example, and I think there are places around the world that we can take a lot of these principles and apply them when we're thinking about co-management of recreational fisheries, when we think about the capacity to actually do the management that's needed. And so I just want to wrap up and thank and say koraboa, which is thank you in the local language, and thank the Ministry of Fisheries and Ocean Resources, the Ambly Bedrock Foundation, the 4 lodges that were instrumental in working with the community and thinking about the ways that we can ultimately build more capacity to promote co-management in this setting. And I just want to end on this slide again, thinking about the nature of the community and the history that we sort of cannot neglect. So, I'll end there.